Hello everybody, welcome to the reading of the Spirit's book. This is chapter 2, The Properties of Matter. Question number 29. Is ponderability an essential attribute of matter? Answer. Of matter as you understand it, yes, but not of matter considered as the universal fluid. The ethereal and subtle matter that forms this fluid is imponderable to you, and yet it is the very principle of the ponderable matter. There's a footnote here saying that explains what ponderable is. Worth serious consideration of having appreciable weight, from the Webster Dictionary. Ponderability is a relative property. This is Kardec explaining. Ponderability is a relative property. Outside the gravitational pull of the globes, there is no weight, just as there is no up or down. So the question is about ponderability of matter, and the answer goes, as we've seen in previous answers, matter as we understand, yes, we can comprehend that which we know, but again, matter as the universal fluid, which was just introduced in the previous section, we cannot understand yet. Is ethereal and subtle, and to us is imponderable, and yet is the very principle of your ponderable matter. So the principle of the matter we cannot yet understand. We have a relative understanding of matter. Question number 30. Does matter consist of one or many elements? One single primitive element is the answer. The bodies you regard as simple are not true elements, but rather transformations of one primitive matter. It's probably good that we take a pause here and as we talk about the specifics of matter and as Kardec is asking these questions. Let's think that this book was written in 1857. The periodic table wasn't even compiled back then. So, quantum physics, all of the things that we understand today and have been, developed in the past century were not available. So he's trying to ask questions and get relative understanding based on the knowledge of the time. So it's good that we take that into consideration when we read this. And yet, I think the questions were pretty sharp as he's trying to nail down some of those definitions. Question number 31. Where do the different properties of matter come from? From the modifications that the elementary molecules undergo as a result of their combining under certain conditions. So here's getting from the properties of matter, and here's is about the modifications of molecules, which today, we learned that in high school is pretty easy to grasp, but probably at the time it wasn't so obvious. I'm not sure if I had read this book back then, if I would, be able to make any sense out of it. Question number 32. Then wouldn't flavors, odors, colors, sounds, even the poisonous or healing qualities of certain bodies be no more than modifications of the one and the same primitive substance? So Kardec asked first about the properties of matter, and then he's asking about the modifications of that. And the answer is yes, of course. And they only exist due to the disposition of the organs that are meant to perceive them. So can matter be modified? Absolutely. But that perception is subject to the body who is perceiving it, so the subject. And then Kardec has a note here. This principle is proven by the fact that not all people perceive the qualities of objects in the same way. What one person finds tasty, another might find disgusting. What appears blue to one person may appear red to another. Something that's poisonous for some might be harmless or even healthy for others. So can matter be modified? Absolutely can. But the perception of that modification is subject to, what one person perceives, and we all perceive things differently. So it's just putting that into that dimension. Question number 33. Is the same elementary matter capable of undergoing all possible modifications and acquiring all possible properties? Yes, is the answer. And this is what you should understand when you say that everything is in everything. The note from Kardec. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and all the other elements we consider to be simple are only modifications of the one primitive substance. As it is yet impossible for us to go back to this substance, except by thinking about it. The elements truly are elements to us, and without further ado, we can consider them as such until further notice. So we can just go that far, because if we get into behind the elements, we're going to get into the fluid, and that's why everything is in everything, because everything is derived of that universal fluid, which we cannot yet comprehend. There's a follow-up question here on 33. Doesn't this theory affirm the opinion of those who do not believe in more than only two essential properties for matter, force and movement, and who believe that all the other properties are only secondary effects that vary according to the intensity of the force and direction of the movement? The answer is, this opinion is correct, but it should also add according to the arrangement of the molecules. This may be seen, for example, in an opaque body that can become transparent and vice versa. So he goes a little bit beyond force and movement. And there is, on the everything is everything, there is a note here from the author. This principle explains the phenomenon known by all magnetizer, which consists in using willpower to confer very different properties upon and any given substance. Water, for instance, a specific flavor or even active qualities of other substances, since there is but one primitive element, and since the properties of different bodies are but modification of this element, the cosmic fluid here, or universal fluid, it follows that the most innocuous substance has the same underlying principle as the most harmful substance. So everything comes from that principle. So everything we know, every substance, it comes from the same principle. Thus, water is made up of one part of oxygen and two parts of hydrogen, but becomes very corrosive if the proportion of oxygen is double. And that would be hydrogen peroxide, right? Is a different than water. An analogous transformation may be produced through the magnetic action directly by the human will. So we're still, there are evidence of, people that can change properties of matter through, magnetizing it. And we have that, we know that matter can be modified through in a lab or, in other ways. So here's just explaining how, matter can be modified. Question number 34. And again, we need to take this question understanding that it's 1857. Do molecules have a defined form? The answer is certainly molecules have a form, but you're incapable of discerning it. We cannot see that, and I don't even think we had what kind of abilities was back in the time to in the labs to see anything. The question is this form constant or variable? The answer is constant for the primitive elementary molecules, but variable for the secondary ones, which are only aggregations of the former. However, what you term a molecule is still very far from being an elementary molecule. So today we get much, atoms and much smaller than that. So I think molecule is the word that he's using to say the smaller matter particle. And the answer is saying you're still limited on that knowledge, right? A lot would still to come. So we're in chapter 2, Question number 35. Universal space. Is universal space infinite or limited? Remember, all men knew back then was Earth. Infinite. If it had limits, what would be beyond them? I know this baffles your reason. Yet, reason itself tells you that it can be no other way. The same is true of the idea of the infinite in all things. It is not something you can comprehend on the restricted world. Then there's a note from Kardec. It's amazing, right? Because today is so obvious to us that other planets and life in other planets is not something that we dwell too much, but back then it was a big concept. And Kardec says, suppose we were to imagine a limit to space. No matter how far out your thought may place this limit, reason tells us that there must still be something beyond it, and so on and so forth to infinity. Even if there were only an absolute void beyond that limit, it would still be space. So you can try to put a limit to it, but it's still going to be beyond that and beyond that and beyond that. Question number 36. Is there an absolute void in any part of the universal space? The answer is no. There is no void. What appears to you to be void is actually occupied by matter that cannot be detected by your senses or instruments. So it could be many other things around us that we cannot see and beyond us as well. So this completes our reading for today. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.